Music's a fantastic drug for a fantasist, and I was a fantasist. You know, I was a dreamer. I ended up with this very odd combination of influences throughout my entire career. All of a sudden, we were using a medium that young people understood. It was music. I still absolutely love what I do. I strap on my guitar and I go out there and I, as my old mum would say, give it laldy. I am Midge Ure, and this is me. I was born in the outskirts of Glasgow in Cambuslang, in a tenement slum. Although at the time I didn't know it was a tenement slum. I had a good inkling it wasn't particularly salubrious, but it was a one-bedroom, ground floor flat. The sitting room had a cavity bed, which I think is peculiar only to Scotland. It was like a hole in the wall with a curtain on it that your parents slept in. My brother and I shared the bedroom. It constantly smelled of damp because there was a little burn would run underneath the little river thing would run under the floorboards, and you could hear the rats scrambling about, whatever. But to me, it was fine. It was an adventure playground because I didn't know anybody else who didn't live in this similar circumstances.
I dream my dreams away. I'm living for today.
7 o'clock in the morning and I'm walking around doing my paper round or whatever, singing at the top of my voice because the sound of the empty streets gave you a natural reverb. So there I was already at 9 or 10 years old trying to recreate the atmospherics that I was hearing on records. There are key moments in your life where a kind of musical door opens up and takes you into worlds you didn't know existed. I must have been 12 or something, 13 when I heard this.
Wondering why I dream my dreams away, and I'm living for today in my mind's eye.
The Small Faces, I suppose, my mind's eye. It was an era where pop music was king. The lyrics were great, the productions were fantastic, and it was a revelation. And I thought, that's for me. That's great. That's these little guys with these big guitars. I had a guitar at this point. I got a guitar when I was 10. My parents scraped up the princely sum of £3, which was half my dad's wages at the time, to buy me a second-hand guitar, which I still have today. It's the one thing in the house that I'd grab first if it went on fire. Music's just a brilliant drug for a fantasist, and I was a fantasist. I was a dreamer, and I saw this Fender Stratocaster in a shop in Glasgow, and it was £110, and it was a huge amount of money. And I said I'd seen this thing to my parents, and my mother, who was a wizard with the very little money she had, got a provident cheque, so it was a loan to go and buy this guitar. I went to an audition with a keyboard player who we didn't really like, which is pretty sad. If he's watching, we did like you, it was fine. In order to get him to try out for the audition, they needed a guitar player. So they said, well, you just play guitar while we audition him. And I said, fine. So we'd play this thing. And of course, they didn't take him on, but they asked me if I wanted the job as a guitar player. Now, I was an apprentice engineer at the time. I'd got this engineering apprenticeship, and it was the job of my parents' dreams. I was already, my brother and I were already moving into a much higher level than my father ever was, and they were ecstatic that we had gone down this route. So I had this huge dilemma. I came home from that audition at 18, said to my parents, look, this has happened. You know, I said, I don't know what to do. I'll leave the decision with you, which is a horrible thing to do. I said, but, you know, I will finish the apprenticeship if you want me to finish it. But the day I finish, I'll never go back and I'll pursue what I want to do. And that's when my mother said, you know, follow your heart. And it was just an astounding thing to me that she would say that. My father was horrified, but my mother said no. She saw it. She could see the glint in my eye. Yeah, I said, go for it. The first thing they did was change my name. You know, my name's James. And of course, Jim McGinley said, well, we can't have two Jims in a band. It's confusing. So you are now Midge, which is Jim reversed. And we just changed the spelling, but little did I know it was going to stick with me for the rest of my life. And we did the circuit. We did the Scottish circuit for 2 or 3 years. Kenny and I, the drummer, went to see Dirty Harry. We went in with long hair, and within 24 hours, we had these kind of James Dean, you know, quiffs, these Dirty Harry haircuts. We were rehearsing in the Apollo, and while we were there, Bill Martin, another Scot, who had co-written all the Bay City Rollers songs and whatever, happened to be in the building, and he heard us learning Sparks, This Town Ain't Big Enough. And he thought it was the record. And he stuck his head out and saw these 4 youngish guys doing this thing and immediately wanted to sign us. And of course, none of us wanted to sign it because we didn't want to be the Bay City Rollers, which is exactly what we became. You know, we turned up to make our first record in London, and we walked into the studio and we heard this thing playing through the speakers, and it was Forever Never. And the session guys had been in that day and knocked off the track because they were used to working with bands who couldn't play. And we were horrified. The day I got the phone call from Bill Martin saying, "You're number one," I didn't feel anything. I felt, you know, like a puppet. I felt I hadn't contributed to it, although I sang the thing, but as a musician I hadn't played on it, I didn't produce it, didn't write it. None of the things that I really wanted was in that.
Hey, hear what they say. It looks just like James Dean.
And the weird thing is that people say that success changes you, and it doesn't really. It changes everybody else. It changes people's attitudes towards you. So all of a sudden, I was really attractive to the opposite sex. And maybe not just the opposite sex, I don't know. It was very, very, very bizarre and strange to deal with because it was all over and done with within 12 months. It was gone. You know, new wave had come along. You know, all these teeny bop bands, including Slick, were finished. And quite rightly so. You know, it all changed. But at that point, I had no idea what I was going to do next.
I'll tell you something I think that you should know.
I got a phone call from Glenn Matlock, the original bass player in the Sex Pistols. And lo and behold, I ended up packing up my old 1954 Vauxhall Wyvern with all my belongings and driving to London. And I joined his band, the Rich Kids. I mean, it was a baptism by fire. I turned up in London and went straight into rehearsals with the band. I'd never met them before. It was chaotic, it was shambolic, but really exciting. So we learned 3 songs, and then we went out that night and we did 3 gigs. We went to see the Police in Islington, and the opening act hadn't turned up. So we said, well, we'll come in and play our 3 songs for you if you let us in for free. So we did.
From the heart.
And then we went to a warehouse party where Sid and Nancy and The Clash and Billy Idol and Susie and the Banshees, all the people I'd read about, were there. And so we got up and played our 3 songs there.
I'm talking about rich kids. This guy is too much for you. You got so much feeling. Something special.
And then we went somewhere else and Boomtown Rats were playing. So we played 3 songs there. It was kind of allowed. It was a freedom that I'd never really experienced before. But the band was kind of splintered. You know, I was starting to listen to a lot of music coming out of Europe. There was somebody who'd spent their entire lives seeking melody and guitarists. To discover electronic music was bizarre. And I bought a synthesizer. And the synthesizer was like the Berlin Wall in the middle of the band. It split the band completely down the middle. 2 of us loved the idea of incorporating this electronic instrument, this modern technology, into a rock band. And 2 of the band hated it. So the 2 who loved it were Rusty Egan, the drummer, and I. And it killed the Rich Kids. But what grew out of that was some of the most exciting stuff that I'd ever done. We used a medium that people understood. We used music to pull the heartstrings and open the purse strings. Rusty Egan, the drummer from the Rich Kids, would come up with a million ideas. And he just said, wouldn't it be great to have, to be able to work with our favourite musicians in the studio and make kind of electronic dance music? We could work with that guy from Ultravox and those guys from the band Magazine. And I went, stop, okay, let's do it. And we put together this collective of musicians for the first Visage album. By the time we'd gotten together and finished this album, towards the end of the process, Ultravox had come back from America, a broken band. The singer had left, John Fox had gone. The guitarist, Robin Simon, had met somebody in America and stayed there, and they'd just been dropped by the record label. Rusty said to Billy Curry, the keyboard player who was part of the Visage project, you know, he's the guy you need for your band. And I was too shy to mention it, you know, because I loved what the band were doing. And I joined this band. And we pooled our money together, whatever money we had, to get into a rehearsal room to see if it would work. And the moment we plugged in, made a noise, it was the most amazing thing that I'd ever heard. It was so powerful. This combination of electronics and guitars and basses and drum machines.
The music is weaving.
It was the antithesis of what was being played on the radio at the time.
Haunting notes, pizzicato strings, the rhythm is calling. Alone in the night as the daylight brings a cool empty silence.
It was too long, it was too slow, it speeds up, it's got a violin solo. It was this weird thing that just captured people's imaginations. So I'd come home. Usually bands are a kind of dictator and 3 or 4 followers. And that wasn't. That was 4 people contributing equally to that piece of music. Things have a finite lifespan, and you know, Ultravox was successful for quite a few years, and Band Aid happened. I was doing the Tube in Newcastle, and it was co-hosted by Jules Holland and Paula Yates, and I've been friends with Paula for years, Bob and Paula. Paula got a phone call, and she handed the phone to me and said, he wants to talk to you. And he told me that he'd just seen the Michael Burke footage of the famine in Ethiopia. He said, look, it's disgusting, I want to do something about it, but I'm not in a position to do something. Can we talk about this when you get back? So, you know, my initial reaction was no, because I hadn't seen the footage. I didn't really know much about it, and I'm busy. I've got an album. I'm promoting the record. Of course, you meet up, and at which point you've seen the footage, and we sat there talking about what we could possibly do, how to generate immediate income, because it was all about immediate aid, and the easiest way and the most efficient way of doing it was a kind of cold and calculated way, which is write a Christmas song.
It's Christmas time.
How we managed to make Bob's ideas and my ideas gel together, I will never know. It was a miracle. He'd already the bones of a song written, which had the famous line, "And there won't be snow in Ethiopia this Christmas," which just doesn't scan on any planet. And I had written this little Jingle Bells thing. I spent 3-4 days in the studio gluing these ideas together and playing all the instruments and laying out a kind of arrangement of this thing, while he was on the phone, bludgeoning artists to come along and do the bit. If it was the other way around, nothing would have happened. I couldn't stand up in front of the UN and tell them they needed an enema. Bob couldn't have sat behind the mixing desk and said, "You're singing that flat," because he doesn't know. I think when Bob and I turned up at the studio, and we weren't sure who was coming, and we saw the sea of cameras and microphones, we knew this was a 3-ring circus, and that's what it kind of had to be.
In our world of plenty, we can spread a smile of joy. Throw your arms around the world at Christmas time.
We used a medium that people understood. We used music to pull the heartstrings and open the purse strings. And that's exactly what happened.
Sing it to the world!
The whole Band-Aid's Live Aid project took me away from Ultravox for nearly 2 years. And when you leave any relationship for 2 years and go back to it, it's not the same. You can't go back in and step in and just take over from where you left off. We didn't know where we were going. We didn't know what we were doing. We were kind of headless chickens, and I think they'll all say that. And we ended up making an album that was very confused and not very good. And maybe if we had stuck it out, we would have got our mojo back. But I kind of held my hand up and said, this doesn't do it for me anymore. And I walked away from what was a very successful situation to just go out there and start again. And it's a whole different journey. All of a sudden, you find yourself writing everything that you think. You're talking about me. This is what I think. This is what I produce. This is what I play. All the we's and us and togetherness is gone. All of a sudden, it's me.
If I was a better man, would fellow man take me to their hearts? If I was a stronger man.
Sometimes you do things that it goes beyond your hardcore fan base. It just transcends that, and it appeals to all ages and whatever. And If I Was one of those. I just wanted to make a record that was simpler than Ultravox.
If I was a soldier.
Life's funny. As a writer, you write what you find is interesting. And 20 years ago, I wrote this album, Breathe. And I thought at the time it was one of the best things I'd ever done. And the world didn't agree. And for 2 years, the Breathe album was the worst selling record that I'd ever made since Slick. And what tends to happen in moments like that is you go away and lick your wounds. You know, you think, I've lost it. I've got no idea what's good anymore. And I got I got a phone call from my label in New York saying there's something happening in Italy. Something's going on. I said, really? And what happened was that a very famous Swiss watch company, had heard the title track, Breathe, and they fell in love with it and wanted to use it in an advert.
With every waking breath I breathe, give me a taste of something new to touch,
And it resonated, so people in Italy started phoning up radio stations asking what this was. It started to kind of build and build and build, and then started to spread out throughout Europe. And it turned it into one of the biggest and best-selling records that I'd ever had. And maybe it's the best way that someone can discover your music, because they're not buying it because of your past, and they're not buying it because it's you. They don't know it's you. They don't know anything about you. So for the first time in my life, I became ageless.
With every waking breath I breathe, I see what life has dealt to me. With every sadness I deny, I feel a chance inside me die.
To most people, I'm the guy in the raincoat with a moustache and a ponytail behind the synthesizer. None of those things all existed at the same time, you know. But that's what people see you as. It's tough at times, but it's the best thing in the world. I still absolutely love what I do. I strap on my guitar and I go out there and I, as my old mum would say, give it laldy.
To see, to